Translated by Deep.com. Disclaimer: this is an unofficial translation from FIGU-Reader Questions Answer 04, German.
FIGU-Leser Fragen Beantwortung 04.
Reader's question: how do you actually assess Merkel's whole act of welcoming refugees, from which she is now apparently distancing herself and acting as if nothing had happened on her part? H.P. Obermeier, Germany.
Answer: my opinion about this is as you can see from the following official interview excerpt from the 683rd contact of June 10, 2017.
While the second evil soon followed, in the form of the confused German alliance, Chancellor Angela Merkel, who self-importantly, stupidly and boldly proclaimed the refugee system welcome culture. On the one hand, well over 1 million refugees from African, Arab and Near Eastern and various other countries flocked to Europe, together with anti-socialists, criminals, shy workers and terrorists who have committed and continue to commit bloody acts of terrorism in various European countries, which have claimed and will continue to claim many innocent lives. On the other hand, since the Merkel refugee welcome culture and the resulting refugee flows became known, thousands of refugees have lost their lives on their escape routes, often in a terrible way, for which the unscrupulous and self-important German alliance, Chancellor Merkel, is solely responsible, but for which she has never been held accountable, and probably never will be. And this despite the fact that the whole inflamed refugee disaster in relation to the thousands of deaths corresponds to a provoked mass murder. And this will be the case, despite the fact that all her work as a refugee power is not only a farce, but a crime against humanity, because she has unscrupulously led refugees, women, men and children of all ages, from war zones and from underdeveloped states on death marches, on which many thousands had to fight for their lives, but lost that fight and died miserably.
Of course this is correct, because the whole thing amounts to mass murder, for which this confused and at the same time self-important Mrs. Angela Merkel has the responsibility and would have to be held accountable, but which, as you say, will probably not happen because such state officials wrongly enjoy immunity on earth, which however contradicts any legal and humane order and justice. What was done by this woman corresponds to a provoked mass murder of several thousand people, which would have to be punished with a lifetime banishment, on with a prison sentence for effective lifetime, because according to the fallible earthly laws a banishment is no longer applied.
For effective murder or mass murder, a life sentence in most states of the world does not mean a lifelong sentence, but only 25 years, whereby the sentence may then be greatly reduced during the sentence in the case of so-called good conduct. In the USA, at least lifelong actually means lifetime.
For an act of murder carried out by a person in a conscious way, but how even for in order to commit murder, a life sentence would have to be imposed by exile or closure of a prison etc. must also be given by law. This, like the should be the case, if people are driven to their deaths by any circumstances, for example by the refugee welcome culture, which corresponds to a refugee terrorism at the pathological self-important Angela Merkel, which has resulted in thousands of refugees from various countries have lost their lives, children, adolescents and adults. What the woman did with it, is no more and no less than a mass murder, for which Merkel has called to account who doesn't have a guilty conscience about her refugee murder culture because her mind, their reason and their perception of responsibility in their stupidity and self-importance, and power obsessions don't go so far as to make her realize her guilt. At the Merkelschen welcome culture is not a philanthropic culture, but something completely different. Terrorist despicableness and a crime in relation to humanity, including when the confused German Chancellor has meanwhile turned away from her refugee welcome craze has. Furthermore, it can be said that a human life at all, as the highest conscious life is most valuable in this respect and must be protected, because it can never be replaced if it dies or is killed and murdered under any circumstances.
Question by Michael Horn, USA. How many years,
Sleepers,
and or terrorists are there in the US? A.
Answer: what Florina gave me from Ta is this, namely, that the players on 31 As of December 31, 2016, they had precise knowledge that the number of 1,407 sleepers was present in the United States, while further pelagic data concerning potential terrorists of other domestic and foreign groups, which do not belong to the Islamic State, with well over 171,000, whereby these were usually terrorist-indoctrinated individuals perpetrators, but also psychopathic and psychologically disturbed.
Question by Michael Horn, USA. What's Sfath referring to the Yellowstone caldera in the 1948 letter?
Answer: yes, but he never said a time when the caldera exploded. He only said that time had long passed and that the caldera was working towards a very massive outbreak, which could be at any time or not for another 100 or 1,000 years.
Question by Michael Horn, USA. Did Sfath get prophecies from Petale or his own abilities, time travel, etc.?
Answer: Sfath had no prophecies from the Petale level, just as he did not make any prophecies. He acquired his special activity with regard to knowledge of the future through looking to the future and through journeys to the future, which are called foresight and have nothing to do with prophecies. Prophecies consist of reasonable projections and probability calculations of certain factors which will inevitably have certain effects if everything continues or is continued within the existing framework. But if the existing framework is changed, then also the effect changes. Consequently, a prophecy does not have to be fulfilled and a different effect arises if the correspondingly decisive development is changed. Prophecies are usually made only in relation to evil, negative and bad effects according to causality, cause and effect that arise from certain evil, negative and bad existing causes to stimulate people to change and transform all evil, negative and bad for the best, good, positive, right and valuable.
Question by Michael Horn, USA. Can you tell us more about the binary sun and their
Dark Wanderer
/ incoming object?
Answer: the Dark Wanderer passed through our solar system many millennia ago and disappeared into the depths of world space.
Question by Michael Horn, USA. Is there an autism vaccine connection?
Answer: the scientific pelagic status of autism spectrum disorders, ASA, is based on a multifactorial development model, whereby the sole cause is not a vaccination, however, depending on the circumstances. The players have no clear connection between vaccination and ASA. A common occurrence of vaccination and autistic symptoms has no causal link, which means that vaccination does not have to be the cause, but may be the case under certain circumstances. Whether a person, whether a child, adolescent or adult, is to be vaccinated or not, possible consequential damage can occur in the same way as if vaccination was omitted. All ailments and diseases can have a very complicated course and equally serious consequences.
Question by Michael Horn, USA. Are there ET artifacts, or an old Nazi base in Antarctica?
Answer: there are no ET artifacts in Antarctica, nor is there an old Nazi base apart from an old and extremely insignificant small building that was used for Arctic research.
Question by Michael Horn, USA. Did something like a missile hit the Pentagon on 9/11?
Answer: no, what raced into the Pentagon on 9/11 was a passenger plane. This was an American Airlines Flight 77, which was to be flown as a morning flight from Washington Dulles International Airport to Los Angeles International Airport, but on 11 September 2001, shortly after takeoff, the aircraft fell victim to a terrorist attack, was captured and hijacked and then steered into the Pentagon, killing all 64 people on board and 125 people on the ground.
Question by Michael Horn, USA. Is it likely that the efforts to remove Trump from the presidency could cause the social unrest, civil wars, etc., resulting in what you said about the fate of the USA after 2020. Superpower USA ceases to exist.
Answer. Ta and I have not talked about this in such a way that a clear answer could have been given. And if I could get an answer, then it would probably be that it would only be given in a private conversation and I would not be allowed to mention it.
Question by Michael Horn, USA. What is known about the Farmington, New Mexico crashes?
Answer. According to Plagiarian sources, this is a story of charlatanism.
Question by Michael Horn, USA. Is there a need for special solutions for transgender issues that you would suggest?
Answer. The term transgender was originally a term for people who could only insufficiently or not at all identify with their original biological sex and who felt that their biological sex was wrong. Today people tend to talk about transsexual, transgender, Latin, trans beyond in English. Gender. Social gender is a term for deviations from the social gender role or social gender characteristics, equal gender. The term transgender can be used absolutely as a positive self-description, as well as a determination of position in heteronormative social space. People who do not want to or are not able to clearly commit to a naturalized role as man or woman usually describe themselves as genderqueer or non-binary, with non-binary gender identity, e.g., bigender. Transgender was and is therefore an umbrella term for people, men and women who live in a non-genetic gender for a certain period of time, which means, for example, that a genetic man is a man or a woman internally or visually for a certain period of time, just as it can be the other way around that a genetic woman can be a woman or a man internally or visually for a certain period of time. Man is born a girl or a boy. So if a person is transsexual, then he has the feeling that he is living in the wrong body. The biological sex is therefore completely different from the perceived or desired sex. But what this means for transsexual people can be extremely different. The fact is that transsexuals cannot choose their fate because they are basically born as transsexuals. There are so-called woman-to-man transsexuals who are female and who would rather have a male body and behave more typically male. On the other hand, there are man-to-woman transsexuals who are male but feel like a woman and also show more feminine behavior. Especially for young people, transsexuality is not an easy life, because living with the feeling of being born in the wrong body can cause profound psychological problems and disorders and destroy the whole joy of life. Many young people affected by transsexuality show or notice their difference very early on. In other words, that their feeling as men or women is completely different from that of their friends. But it usually takes a long time for them to understand, name and stand by this otherness. In addition, many transsexuals have to struggle in many moments of their lives with the fact that their peculiarity is not recognized by others due to incomprehension or even total misguided revulsion.
The need